Welcome back to another episode of The Lofty Lenders Homebuyer Education, where we explore tips, tricks, and stories to help you plan for your next home purchase. If you're a first time buyer, move up buyer, and investor just looking to learn, we hope you gain a little bit of knowledge today. Today, we're breaking down a strategy that's getting a lot of attention in the market, or at least it has been over the last couple of years, and that is something called temporary rate buydowns. Today, we're going to talk about what they are, how they work, and how they might be a game changer for affordability, especially right now when, housing affordability is a fairly prevalent topic, Charlie.
It is. And I mean, a lot of times you hear these promo things and it's like the promo credit cards, which, we're not a fan of. But the temporary buy downs can actually work kind of nice, especially when, like you said, you're trying to bridge that initial gap of getting in your first home or making that step up to the next price range. It's nice.
Yeah. So first off, I want to start off talking about like what it is. So a temporary rate buy down is essentially the first year, 2, 3 years, something depending on the product you use. It allows you some temporary payment relief. And essentially the way it works, the nitty gritty and how you get that relief is the seller sets aside money, and then that interest rate is in theory a little bit lower than where you start with for your final term, your full rate. And if say you're doing a 1-0 buy down, for example, that means for the first year, you are 1% less than whatever the fully amortized rate is. So let's just use a round numbered example of, let's say interest rate is 6% today. And with the 1-0 buy down, the first year it's going to be 5%. The second year, it's going to go to 6%. It's going to stay at 6% from then on. How that differs from an adjustable rate mortgage, which a lot of people think adjustable rate, it moves around. So therefore a temporary rate buy down must be something similar. An adjustable rate typically has a fixed period up front, usually 3, 5, 7, 10 years up front of fixed, and then it can change thereafter. This one it's going to be changing at the beginning, and then it's going to be fixed thereafter. So those are really the main key differences.
And it's a lot easier. I mean, the adjustable, you have a margin, you can do the math, but for most people, that adjustable calculation's a little bit screwy because they're not used to it. This is easy. Like you said, you start out and then you'll adjust to whatever it is, but then it stays put. Way less unknown, which is really nice.
So Charlie, if we start talking to somebody about a rate buy down and they think they might want to use it, why would they want to use it? Like, what's the real reason here to these products even exist, I guess?
Yeah. And you and I have been seeing some. There's a lot more potential desire when people hear about it just because you always think there's that, free. Well, nothing's ever free, but it can work really nice when the seller's motivated to try and give some concessions for something, whether it's, a builder giving appliances or some free upgrades or a rate buy down, or even an existing seller that wants to sweeten the pot and have their house maybe be more attractive than their neighbor's house. So it's attractive on the buyer's side to get into the little bit more expensive home that they want to bridge that gap, or maybe they're having a raise in the next year. So there's lots of little nuances, but it really is just a way to market for the seller, or like you said, with the buyers, getting something a little bit cheaper for the first year, maybe two, and having time to gradually get into that normal budget. And I tend to see a lot of people getting out of school. Like you get your first job or second job, you haven't hit that milestone yet where you get that big, raise of, hey, you've been here a year, you've got that experience, now you take that pay bump. So some of those small bridges like that, I think they work quite nice.
And I think you can relate it to something like a gym membership, right? Where you might pay an intro rate for the first 3 months, where your monthly payment is only $15 a month. And then after you've been, okay, now we've got you in here 90 days in a row, we actually have you establishing a new pattern. Now we're going to go ahead and start charging you the full amount. And, it's $20 or whatever. So it's kind of like that, right? Where you're going to have that first year or maybe 2 years or whatever, but you're going to have a reduced monthly payment for a little while. And then eventually it gets to the normal payment.
I don't think it's like that at all, Kyle, because gyms, it's just, I don't go.
Well, you
So
don't know
why
who
would I
Jim
pay
is?
for,
You've
who
never
is
met him?
Jim? I don't know who this guy is. All these people know this Jim guy. But I mean, between, getting you started and getting you comfortable with the gym when it's not something you're used to, I'd also throw like the tax abatements, get you in, give a little bit of a perk for communities that are trying to bring people in, and you get that lower taxes for the first year, maybe few years, and they kind of, work themselves up to where you're back up to a fully taxed home. No, again, I don't go to the gym, so that one's crazy for me, but
So I had a story real quick. I had a guy and his wife. talking about buying a house. And while they could afford the fully amortized monthly payment, they didn't really want to. And they're very conscious about making sure that the payment was affordable so that they could still live a life of going out and doing the things they like to do, going out to dinner, that kind of stuff. And so he really loved this 2-1 buy down idea from the start. And so we went to the sellers, presented it to them as a 2-1 buy down option. They, of course, are throwing money aside into an escrow account so that they can make this whole thing work. And sellers were on board with it. We're moving forward. The buyer reveals to me that, well, I'm actually going to be getting a new job here in the next couple of years. And so I know I'm going to make a lot more money. Things are going to be in better financial position for me. Yes, I can qualify based on, the numbers we use, the debt to income ratios, all that kind of stuff. He can qualify right now based on all of that, but he doesn't love that payment at the higher amount. And so we know he's going to make more money down the road. His payment's going to go back up to that fully amortized payment. It's going to kind of work in his favor. You know that your income's going to increase. You know that your payment's going to increase. Now it doesn't feel like as big of a blow when your payment increases and you're not ready for that or whatnot. So
I love that. And we've had it to where, between spouses, one's still in school, one's making money. Yes, we can afford it. But once husband or wife, whatever, gets out of school, now we get that second income. So yeah, I love that example where you're having a big milestone, and everybody's a little different, but we've even had inheritances. Like, all right, I'm going to get inheritance. I can pay my other debt off, and then I'm okay with the mortgage payment going up because anything's possible. But knowing that the communication and talking through not just what people want right now, and the situation is immediately, what do you expect the next year, 2 years? There's so many things that a lot of people have that back here. And if we can talk about it, bring it out in the front, great resource to get somebody in, keep it manageable, and then they can have that stepping stone with those milestones that do pop up.
yeah, I'd say right now we're seeing a lot of sellers and builders for that matter offering concessions, which is something that markets ebb and flow. A couple of years ago, you didn't see any of that because houses were coming off the shelf just as soon as they were hitting. Now we're starting to see sellers more willing to give some concessions so that hopefully they can get rid of that house. That means that buyers have more negotiating power to ask for that temporary rate buy down instead of just accepting the rate as it is. Additionally, with rates expected to fluctuate, strategies like this are becoming more and more popular because they create short-term affordability without waiting on the market. And so you don't necessarily have to just time the market perfectly. You just hop into it when you're ready, and then you need to make sure you have a strategy set up.
Yep. And again, it's all about the details. No right or wrong, but everybody can have that backup. So if something does shift or they happen to buy a little more expensive house or jobs delayed for that raise, love having plan A. And then here's what we can do to supplement if we need to.
All right, so here we go. 3 actionable takeaways. Number 1, ask about seller concessions up front. So make sure you worked with your realtor. When you make that offer, don't just negotiate on the price, but also see if you can get seller concessions, maybe towards a temporary rate buy down. Number 2, run the numbers both ways. Compare a permanent rate buy down versus a temporary one. Sometimes you're able to buy that rate down so that you don't have to have that bump up in the next year or 2 years. And other times it makes more sense to just go with what's being offered and maybe using those concessions for the temporary buy down. And then finally, have a long-term game plan, not just a short-term one. So that 1 to 2 years, they can strategically be used, whether it's increasing income, maybe you've got debt you're going to be paying down because you're going to have that lower monthly payment, or maybe you're really certain that rates are going to be coming down over the next couple of years. So you're really hoping for a refinance opportunity. That was another customer of mine that used the 2-1 buy down. They said, well, we're going to get into this payment knowing that rates are going to come back down someday, and we're going to refinance before it gets to that fully amortized rate. Didn't necessarily work out for them, but that was something that they were pretty confident about. It's still, they were able to qualify. Here's the other thing, and I want people to fully understand this. When we're qualifying you off of the 2-1 buy down, you have to qualify for the highest monthly payment. The underwriter's not going to let you buy that based on, well, you can afford the first year of payment, but once it bumps up that second year, you can't afford it anymore. No, that's not how that works. It's the same thing with the tax abatement you were mentioning. People talk all the time about, I can afford the payment because there's no taxes, but once taxes kick in, I don't know if I can afford it anymore. Underwriting's going to estimate those taxes and try to figure out, can you afford it before you get into a house that is no longer becoming affordable for you?
The devil's in the details, as always. Kyle, I love that one because people do think it's like, well, I can afford it right now. And that's where a lot of frustrations come into play with underwriting. It's like, why are you doing this? Underwriting wants to make sure that it's safe. It's good for you. You're not going to lose the house. And they're looking at what, year 2 and 3 is going to look like, not just today.
Yep. So temporary buy downs aren't a magic solution by any means, but in the right situation, they can make a very powerful tool to make homeownership more accessible and less stressful upfront, especially when you have a seller who's willing to play ball. Or, like Charlie said, maybe the sellers are already using it as an opportunity to sell their house and they are pushing it. So find the material that are listed on those open houses, go check and see if that's something the seller's already interested in. It's all about creating flexibility and giving yourself options in a changing market. So, Charlie, anything else about temporary buy downs before we wrap it up today?
Not really. I mean, I think it's just like you said, it's one of the pieces. You can talk through it. It might make perfect sense on one house and not the other. So you just need to run the numbers and get comfortable and just don't be shy. Ask questions. And if you are getting comfortable with it, that's what's necessary.
Wonderful. Well, we hope you enjoyed the conversation today and found it valuable. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms and subscribe to the podcast for more exciting episodes. And remember, stay curious. We'll see you next week on The Lofty Lender.